Hey guys, hope you really enjoyed this video that I did with Joe Kampert of the Redwood Insurance Group. I had a really fun time making this video. We had a great conversation. Joe's somebody I got a lot of respect for, so I hope you guys enjoyed as well. I hope you guys also enjoy hearing about this video's sponsor, which is Lead Heroes. Guys, Lead Heroes has got you covered when it comes to telemarketing leads, Medicare supplement leads, final expense leads, 265 leads. They also got you covered when it comes to virtual staffing, affordable, highly quality, and highly trained virtual staff members that you can bring on for affordable rates and prices, and they did all the training for you to make sure that they know what to do, and they also did the vetting process to make sure you're finding good people. Just because you watch this video, they're going to give you 10% off any order you make on the website. Link can be found down in the description as well as the coupon code, so go ahead and check them out. Without further ado, enjoy the video. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Christian Brindle here, back with you to talk with you, bringing you another video, some value, some great content. And today I have a really special guest here with me today, somebody that I've been meaning to do a video with for some time. It's long overdue. I got the PNC world's superstar himself, actually, superstar in multiple different trajectories more than anything else. But I have Mr. Joe Kampert here with me today. Joe, first things first, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you. Well, one, thank you for the kind words to kick it off. Superstar, I'm probably superstar in the making. I've been in it for like 8 years, but superstar still in the making. I've got quite a bit to learn, man, but I'm doing great. I hope this resonates with some people on the call too. I started all when I was on the phone selling. It was, hey, I've got a roof over my head and clean water to drink, baby. Life ain't that bad. And so I'm doing great, dude. I'm blessed. And thank you again for having me on the call.
Hey, the pleasure's all mine, and I appreciate you taking time, out of your schedule. I know you're a busy dude, and man, you're everywhere. That's one thing I wanted to mention to you. One thing, like when people interview me on their channels or their podcasts, whatever the case might be, I hear a lot of people say that about me. They're like, you're everywhere. You're always in my news feed. You're in my algorithm. I see you every, 30 seconds when I pick up my phone. And that's how you are for me. I see you everywhere. And, which means you're doing something right. If anybody is not familiar with Joe Kampert, with Redwood, talk a little bit about your story and kind of how you got into the industry. Because I know you and your dad kind of partner, right, and run their agency together. Talk about that dynamic and how did you guys start Redwood? How did you get into the business?
Yeah. So it's funny. I get to do this on every single interview, and everybody always leads with, nobody ever was in, or 5 or 6 years old and wanted to be in insurance. Like,
no,
I'm like in the back and I'm like, I actually did. And it's crazy how now when Redwood first started 4 years ago, rewind 20 years from that start point. And I was in second grade at the career fair, and I wanted to be an insurance agent because my dad was my hero and I wanted to be just like my dad. So I literally have been wanting to be in insurance since I was a wee little lad. And it's hilarious. So many people say nobody ever just wanted to be an insurance agent. Everyone wanted to be an astronaut or an NBA player. I still wanted to be in the NBA, but I was like, oh yeah, insurance too. And then literally fast forward 20 years to where I had already been in the insurance, and then Redwood started. So I got my start. Really kind of something that we've even implemented here in Redwood was in an internship program. So I needed an internship in between my sophomore and junior year of college. I talk about this a lot too, it's a lot of it's how we were raised, right? Like to where I grew up, hey, you go to school, you go through grade school, then you go, you get your GED or whatever, and then you go to college, you get your degree, and then you get a good job. And so it's hilarious. Them and what was needed for me to get into this business scholars program is ultimately what got the school to lose me, right? Because I went, had an internship in St. Louis, Missouri, is where I started. And I started in the captive world. So I started with Allstate and just needed a job over the summer. So I could get into this business scholars program that was supposed to, be better on my degree and all this. And so when I say an intern, like I was a freaking intern. We had bought the agent I worked for, Tracy Bibb, shout out Tracy, love you, who really showed me the ropes of insurance, even though we were captive, like just showed me the right things to do. And that really changed kind of how Redwood came to be and everything like that too. But we had just bought this old dude's book of business. And so my job that whole summer was literally scanning paper. Like we had filing cabinets 3 high, probably as long as our entire building, right? Like on the back wall. And my job was to literally take out the folders, right? Because the guy was all paper. And if they weren't already in our agency management system, to create them and then scan in paperwork. And so literally I did that. And then come the end of the summer, she's like, hey, look, I know you haven't really wanted to ever be in school. It was kind of just, whatever. It wasn't crazy, but it was definitely not my path, especially. And she goes, hey, I'm getting ready to let this person go. Would you like to come on full time and just stay here full time? So made a decision to actually drop out of school. I say I dropped out, right? Everybody's like, Joe flunked out. I did not flunk out. I chose not to go back. I could have. My scholarship decreased a little bit, though. I will tell you that much. My grades weren't the best, but I chose to go full insurance, man, and I never looked back. So started in service. So that's actually, I credit a lot of my success in sales because I knew where I started, everything that happened after you push the button, right? And I think a lot of people, it's very sales, like all sales mentality. But really the whole kind of goal of this thing, especially anybody who's in the Medicare PNC space or whatever, where it's not as much upfront, it's the longevity play. Right. Anybody can sell a policy, but can you keep it, right? So I accredit a lot of my sales success to starting in service, right? When you can take all I did was increase calls and claims. So anybody that was increasing 30% or more, I had to call them. And this is like my first 6 months in insurance, dude. And I would just get screamed at. And I'm like, but if I can talk to people when they hate me the most, right? Like, what does that do when they really need me or when I can be in that advisor position? So fast forward from there, worked for a few different agencies. So kind of just was scaling up, went from service to commercial sales. So I was only doing basically business owners, fleets, stuff like that, commercial auto. Ended up leaving that agency to go start up a scratch office. In that time, Pops came back to me. He had left insurance for a short stint, came back, and he was on the corporate side of things. So I was helping one of his scratch agents in my dad's market. He's like, dude, this guy doesn't know, like, please go help him start up, right? So it's kind of funny where we started working together some sort of fashion, right? Back then, even though it wasn't direct to each other, I was basically helping one of his agents hit his numbers so dad could hit his numbers, right? Yeah. And that's really, I think, where I came into myself, where it was like, he was a very hands-off boss. I worked 6 days a week. I had no vacation days. I had to bring my own coffee to work, right? I mean, you want to talk about a grind. I mean, I grinded and for pennies on the dollar, but I learned everything. Like I did all this customer service, all the sales, all the marketing, right? That was before headsets. And, I'm doing 30 mailers, 100 cold calls a day. Mm-hmm. I mean, all these things where, I look back at it like I hated it then, but it was a job and I needed something to pay bills, right? And I knew I wanted to be in insurance, and I'm a big believer in you got to kind of start at the bottom of the totem pole, right? And prove your worth. And so I quickly took that scratch agency with zero marketing dollars. Like I'm talking literally cold calling and sending out mailers to people around our area in Fenton, Missouri, to number one in our market. And so, okay, like I can actually do this thing, but I was still freaking broke, man. Yeah. And so then I ended up meeting another agent. He was like a top 5 agency in the country. Again, started over at the bottom of the totem pole, quickly rose through the ranks there. And then it was like, oh shoot, okay, like now I'm making over 10 grand a month. I've never even knew I could make money like this coming from where I was at in Fenton, Missouri. And so then it got to the point of really, hey, am I going to start an all-state office? At the time, me and dad we're very family centric. So we've always wanted to do something together. And it was between me starting my own office or starting up Redwood. And literally, man, we started up Redwood. I tell you, you're talking about trajectories earlier. Man, I could not tell you our trajectory, right? You asked me when we first started, we got the direct appointments, which was huge. We didn't know it at the time. But it was like, best of luck to you. Right. I'm like, oh, shoot, dude. So like we were just cold calling again, still broke, starting a scratch office, never knowing anything. And we had just relocated back to Austin, Texas, after 20 years of being gone. So we didn't really know anybody again. But man, just put in the work and really just having that good work ethic with doing things the right way. It led us to where we are today, where we're a PNC IMO. So anybody watch, I don't say aggregator or cluster because everybody's like, what is an aggregator or a cluster? If you're on the PNC side, you know that. If you're not, shout out Josh Lustig. He was like, dude, all these people don't know what you guys are. Just tell me you're a PNC IMO. So we do that as well as run a traditional agency where I'm still selling everything to our community and really all across the country. So long story short, there was a lot of trial and error in there. But man, I wouldn't change a thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, I would say when you first hit my radar, when I first knew about you, there's two things that come to mind in my memory. The first one was Tony Merwin posted a picture of you and him together. And I guess you had done a policy for him or something like that. And he was like, give you some love. And I was like, oh, I'm like, so this is Tony's PNC guy, I'm like, and then, I saw the Insurance Syndicate get started and just seen that thing blow up. You guys have done a tremendous job. I mean, as somebody that's built a group really from nothing and built it up, and into having a respectable following, that's not easy. And it's a huge commitment. And I think a lot of people, don't realize what it takes for a group to really grow. I mean, there's a lot more Facebook groups out there in our niche that have like 200 members and they never get above that than there are ones that have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 members in it. What made you guys want to start the Insurance Syndicate?
It's a good question. Nobody's asked me that. They always say they shout out Syndicate, but why did we actually create it? And it's really even why did we name it what we did? So really the power of events. And I know you know about the power of events. We went to an event called the Power Players Retreat. And that was about 18 months ago with Cody Askins in Springfield, Missouri. And that was kind of the first eye-opening, like, dang, why are we only doing PNC? Right. You can only hear Pete Fournier or Nate Offord or, Ron Ray or all these just freaking Tony Merwin and talking about all their Medicare numbers. And even just, I didn't know the difference between like what Tony was doing versus somebody who was actually selling Medicare. Right. And it was really just eye opening that, there's no reason, like if we're sitting here preaching options as an independent shop, why am I referring business out? Now, I'm not hating on referral partners. I totally get it. Like people wanting to stay in their lane and really kind of just focus down and specialize. I can respect that totally. Yeah. But I also challenge it. And that's kind of what the syndicate really came to be was, just because I offer it doesn't mean I have to actually do it myself. I can still be a PNC phenom and then have somebody that's running my life, health, and Medicare division, right? And there's no reason that still can't roll up to me. I didn't know what a freaking upline was. I'd tell Tony, this is really how me and Tony got connected because I kept calling it Medicaid. And he's like, dude, if you call it Medicaid one more time, I'm like, I don't know the freaking difference. But again, when you put numbers together and you start, again, like when Pete Fournier tells me he just goes out, I'd never heard of 100% plus comps. Like, what is that? Like, you're telling me if I sell $1,000 policy, it's going to pay me over $1,000 in a week too? I don't have to wait a whole month for this. I'm like, what am I doing, dude? And so, the more I started to think about it, and really the more as kind of Redwood came to be, and as we started talking with agents in all different verticals of the industry, it really got me thinking. I want to create basically, and it's, if you look at the definition of the syndicate or of the word syndicate, it is basically a collective, an organization, or a group all together for a similar cause, right? And for me, I think our products are so complementary to each other. There's no reason we shouldn't be doing both, right? And again, maybe I don't have to do it, but I've got a partner that does now, right? Or something along those lines where, it more was, no wonder my referral partners love me on the life side. I've been licensed to do it the whole time. I'm like, oh, they'll do it. And I'm like, well, yeah, they send me an auto policy and I make like $75, $100. Now I make it forever. But then I'm like, well, no wonder. Like I've been sending them thousands of dollars a month. Like, man, I want to keep that in house. Right. So that's kind of where it came together. Was I really, for the first time, started to see life and health agents ask about P&C. They were tired of being asked while they were sitting in a house, can you do auto and home too? Right. And vice versa. P&C side, I mean, we're so commoditized and we're dealing with all these clients, right? And we talk with them a lot. But when they come to ask me for other options, why am I not able to provide that to them? So that's kind of where it came to fruition. I'd been thinking about it. I'm glad I locked down the name Syndicate because it was just freaking gold. And then really Merwin, we started talking and he kind of saw my vision and he was like, yes, dude, like 100%. Right. And so that's where Syndicate started. Was how can we get everybody in a group where they can really see behind the scenes of what actually goes into running a P&C operation? How much do you get paid for Medicare? What is a med sup, right? All those things where you just don't know what you don't know, right? And so I wanted to create a group where, hey, you don't have to, but if you are interested, right, in getting into other verticals, right, here are industry leaders. Here are people that are already either doing one or the other or both. How are they being successful at that, right? And that was kind of where Syndicate came from. Just getting the right people into the right room, right, virtually, and then just going from there. And we started in March. And so we're growing almost 100 members a week. We're at 3.4 thousand members. And so literally started halfway through March, and within not even 11 months, we've grown that thing over 3,000 members without spending a dime. And I know you're like that too. It's all organic, man. When you lead with value and education, they will, hey, where's Christian? Like, what is his group, right? And they start to just flock to you when you're doing the right things. So that's kind of where it started.
Absolutely. And I think, one thing that I love about Facebook groups is like the ones that are really good, like yours, of course, like Medicare Gurus and, groups like that. They take on the personality of the person that's running the group, right? The person and they all have their own unique vibe to them. They all have their unique personality to them. Some of them are more, kumbaya, we're all in this together. Others are more, maybe dramatic, confrontational, like different kind of groups. Like, and it's fun. It's funny because, you can be in the different groups and a voice might resonate with somebody, even if it's a similar message, right? But it's the voice and the way the information's presented that might, catch the eye of somebody that, maybe that's how they identify with that certain message. And yeah, I mean, you guys have done a tremendous job, and it's a great group, and you do a really good job with it.
And I think to your point too, on just the different voices, right? Like sometimes it takes, if I have my staff or somebody in there, right? Sometimes it takes somebody else saying the exact same thing that I'm trying to say. It's just not me for it to resonate with them, right? To where then it's like, even as a leader though, sometimes you're kind of like, come on, bro, I've been saying that how many times, man? But sometimes all it takes is the right person saying it in a way that resonates with you that can change everything, right? And I think that's, another thing that we really built. Like a lot of insurance like groups, they won't let marketers in there, right? Or they won't let lead providers or whatever. And that's kind of, again, we are all going for that same, like it's the same cause, right? And so that's the collective, is that, hey, there's no reason for somebody not to be in the group as long as they're providing value, right? So then when I try to go through, I created that preferred vendor list that I'm sure you've seen, right? And it's like, why would I not want somebody in here that's doing a really good job on lead gen to provide value to our members, right? And I think, again, some groups will lock that down. Now, again, if it's spam or something, like you're only in there to take, you're out. I don't care if you've got a good product or not. But I don't get why you would lock that down, where it's, if I can provide, or at least be able to say, hey, these people are actually doing a good job. There's a bunch of testimony. Like, why would you not let them in the group, right? Now, and again, it depends on the type of group. It fits with my group and what my cause of creating the group was for. I want y'all working with the best lead vendors out there. And if I can get a preferred syndicate discount, makes it even better, right? So I think that's to your point, where some groups can really narrow it down, or maybe it's very hostile. I know we all know groups out there where it's like, do not go against the freaking cut, because otherwise you're out. You know what I'm saying? And that's just, again, when you lead with value and education, there's no reason, for them to not be in that group. So
yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think about Six Figure, and one person that comes to mind that, like, if I took the approach early on where we didn't want lead vendors or lead aggravators in there at all, Glenn wouldn't be in the group. And Glenn has been, instrumental in the growth of Six Figure. He's probably contributed towards the growth of that group as much as anybody that's not me, and so, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think it comes down to, who's actually bringing value to the community, who's making it a better community, no matter what their title might be. And I think that's, always been my preferred way to look at it. Like we let lead vendors in there. We let IMOs and FMOs in there, competing IMOs and FMOs. We let call centers in there. We let, people that work at call centers, and everybody in between. They're welcome in the group as long as they follow the rules and, they're respectful and they bring value. One thing I wanted to ask you, Joe, I want to be respectful of your time, but I was curious on something. As somebody that, started as an agent, right, making a lot of cold calls. I started really the same way. I started working with my dad when I was really young, and my dad built his Medicare supplement business in the 90s and early 2000s. So he built his business on the back of cold calling. And so that's
on the phone book is what he did.
Yeah. No caller ID, no nothing.
Right.
And so that's how I was taught when I first came in. And so my first, handful of years, I was making cold calls, probably 90% of what, all that I was doing at that point in time.
Yep.
When you bring a new agent into your agency today, what is typically the blueprint on what you guys would say that you teach to agents? Like what do you think is a good way to come in as a brand new agent, whether they're in the P&C world or maybe they're in the Medicare world? Because it's all relative, right? What is the key to being successful in 2022, starting from scratch?
Yeah. So, and I'm doing it right now. We've had a guy with us that's been, he's just over 30 days with us, brand spanking new, green into insurance, right? So even if you're a veteran, or if you're like, I don't know the difference between, whatever, like for us, it's like, I don't know what bodily injury is, right? Things like that, where to me, you start with systems and process, right? So I don't actually even put them on the phone. Like his whole first really 2 weeks, it is literally all you're doing is learning about insurance and you're learning how to quote it, right? Like, and I'm just like quoting ourselves, right? Quoting himself. I don't care if he quoted himself 5 times in a day. It's the repetition, getting him comfortable with that so that when he is live on the phone, right, or whatever it is, he knows what to do. So I think, again, get very familiar with your systems, but then have a process behind it. Like, so our process is, hey, when you have somebody, we take everything via form submission. Now, again, this could be different based off compliance or whatever. I know you guys, there's, way different on that side of things. But for us, it's, hey, you want an auto and a home quote? Here's the link, right? Fill out the form. Then that form comes over to us, and we're putting that form into our CRM before we even start quoting, right? Because data is the new currency, right? And so I think a lot of people will just go straight to quoting, and then it's like, you don't capture any of the information to where maybe you quote them and you don't get them. Well, you still want all that data, right? And then what you quoted them at, so that, hey, 6 months to a year down the road, I can call them back, right? Because life is forever changing. So for me, I'm really big on know the system and then have a process to back it. You can be the most badass salesman. If you don't have a process or a system with it, it doesn't matter, right? So much stuff slips through the cracks. You start missing things, then you're missing tasks. You're not being diligent in that. So for me, it's definitely carriers and processes, just getting him in there, getting him comfortable, even though he doesn't know what he's talking about really. Then we go into scripting, right? So now that you're comfortable, now you at least know where to put the information in when you're quoting it, right? Hey, send him the link to get the information. Now we've got to actually be able to sound like we know what we're talking about. So then we do role play. I think I had let up on that. That's probably why, like, all of my employees that I've hired in the past 4 years are all gone, and he's sticking, right? And he's actually doing really well. We just role played, man. And it can be awkward, right? Like, we're literally, you're in my office and you're quoting me. And we went through multiple scenarios where, hey, if it's a requote where we've quoted you in the past, right? And we're just seeing if we can come back now, or straight up, like, here's age data. Here's how to get somebody to trust you in 30 seconds, right? So live role play. I used to think modules were enough, right? Just going through and listening, it's not, right? So then it's like, once we have the process and the system, now we're really kind of fine tuning scripts. So especially if somebody who's building a downline, give them some type of like base, right? So I always had what I said, but Austin doesn't sound like Joe, right? And Austin doesn't sell like Joe. And we all can now, but don't let them stray too far from the path, right? Because they still ultimately, they don't know. And
Right.
so just give them kind of the framework, and then let's keep going through it. And it's like, let's maybe tweak that. That don't really sound like how you talk, right? Because I want you to be on the script, but at the same, I don't want you to sound scripted, right? So then we did role play, and then literally outbound. I didn't give him a referral. We have a ton of age data. So we went through Data Man Group is where we went. So we can just go buy like home X dates or whatever and just start calling, run them through the scrub tool, making sure they're not on the DNC, and then just pound the phones, man. And so, for me, it's the 1, 2, 3, right? And now this may, depending on your product, that may be a little bit too much outbound, especially on how long your quoting process is, but I can churn and burn auto and home quotes all day like that, right? It's just data entry. So mine was the 1, 2, 3. It's 100 phone calls, 2 hours talk time, 3 policies sold. 2 out of the 3 should be done every single day. If you're hitting the 100 calls in the 2 hours talk time, maybe the sales didn't happen that day, but I promise you they will catch up. And as long as you're hitting 2 out of those 3, the sales will follow, right? And so getting him used to that outbound expectation. Like, dude, if there's nothing on your desk and you don't have any referrals coming in, especially because you're brand spanking new, you probably don't want the referrals yet until you really iron everything out.
Right.
You should be outbounding. It's a numbers game, right? The more people I talk to, the more people I quote, the more people I quote, the more people I sell. And and I think sometimes we try and reinvent the wheel, but now literally, if he's not working a referral that I'm sending him or a trucking lead or whatever that I'm sending him to work, I don't even have to ask him to get on the phones because that's all he knows, right? So then if he's slow, he's going to try and drum up more business, right? And he understands that it's a numbers game. I truly believe there should always be some type of outbound expectation, right? Now, does it need to be 100 calls? And plus, you won't get to 100 calls once you start getting your, cutting your teeth. You got referrals coming in. You're using Facebook. It's another big thing. Like, I have to, it's so funny. People like, how do you get, your people off of Facebook? And I'm like, I'm trying to get them on there, man. Like, gosh, I could not get them to use it enough. Like, keep adding friends, be active in the groups, those types of things. But when you use Facebook the right way, right, even how we got in front of each other, right? So obviously, I'm manipulating that algorithm. I'm getting in front of the audience I want. If you can teach that to somebody, right? If I can have a bunch of Joe's running around starting up Facebook groups and drumming up all the business I do from a free tool, it's just, you got to use it as a business tool. And I think that's where people fall off is they don't use it as a business tool. And then they're looking at pictures of babies and wedding photos and, oh man, look, they got rowdy this past weekend, right? Or whatever it is. Next thing you know, you're on YouTube, watching like freaking whatever. So again, those are kind of my basics. And again, they're basic. Right. So many of us, we've been in it so long. Sometimes it's been a while since we've been back to the basics, right? And so I just went back to how I was taught, and that's what I've done, and it's worked out. I mean, the guy, dude, he last week, he just had somebody pay in full over $25,000 on a trucking account, auto, and home, all paid in full. Woo. Right? Like, for somebody being brand new to be able to somehow, now granted, it wasn't perfect, and that's the other thing. Okay, hey, you won there, and then the next morning, all we did was like hardcore analyze that call, because now we're going to get better. You won, so it wasn't horrible, but now we're going to get better, right? And so I think those few pieces, man, really with that outbound expectation, if they can outbound and sell, I promise you they can take referrals at high closing ratios and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think it's great because, when you start off as a new agent, the basics are going to build a foundation upon what you're going to build your business on, and everything else comes from the basics, right? Like, if the basics is your foundation, all the branches and leaves and all those other things, that's when you start to get more, you start to see more, new diverse ways of adding to your approach, but it's all based on the foundation, and you never want to get too far away from the basics. So I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom in what you're saying there. And we teach a lot of the same things, and with our agents, I think people always, one thing you just said that you hit it on the head with is people want to reinvent the wheel, whereas you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You're going to make a square wheel first. It's not going to work, then you're going to make an octagon or something like that, where if you just take the wheel as is, it's going to work pretty well. It's worked pretty well up until this point. I think I think there's
Well,
a
it's
lot
like,
of
and
wisdom in that.
if you can build books of business off a phone book, I mean, I'm promised the wheel ain't broken, right? It's more of just how can we maybe put some WD-40, or grease it up a little bit to spin a little faster, because it's like, if our parents, right. And it's funny, my dad, like same thing. They didn't have like, man, when he started a state farm agency back in the day, and literally like, here's the phone book, right? And he just would every single night just call A to Z, man. And if somebody can build an agency off that, guys, like I promise you, the wheel ain't broken. Like now we just kind of come in and we make it our own wheel, but like not to stray too far, because it obviously works, right? If they can do it, then it definitely works for us. It's spinning a little faster.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Joe, before we let you go, I wanted to have you talk real quickly, because you're a person that's created a multitude of different Facebook groups, right? The Insurance Syndicate isn't the only Facebook group that you manage and that you've created. Talk a little bit about the Acquisition Syndicate, which is a newer group that you've come up with recently.
Yeah. So it kind of, again, it all kind of spurred, and I'll tell this to everybody too. Before you go out and pull a Joe and like just go start up like 5 Facebook groups overnight, I learned this. I coined it from Coach Burt. Make sure it's congruent, right? Like make sure it actually makes sense. Like there's no point for me to go out and start the Acquisition Syndicate or the Insurance Syndicate or the Gaming Syndicate or whatever if it's not congruent with what I'm trying to do, right? So Coach Burt really that was eye-opening to me, is if it doesn't ultimately fit into my business model, right, then why are you doing it, right? And so for me, I started the Acquisition Syndicate. The Acquisition Syndicate is basically, it's just a trend, man. It is a hot market right now. But I also have seen, just from being in other acquisition Facebook groups, that there's a huge gap, right? And that gap is connecting buyers and sellers, right? Or even people who are interested that maybe have the capital and the funds to acquire. They just don't know where to freaking start, right? And so again, that was kind of the whole thing about the Insurance Syndicate. And now the Acquisition Syndicate is literally full on transparency. Like, I'm not going to collect all your agency information. And there's a group out there, literally, hey, we've got this book, and this book for sale. Fill out all this information. And so you give them all kinds of financial information, name of the agency, all this type of stuff. But then unless you're chosen, you don't actually get to speak to the seller, right? So then it's like, well, why did I just give you all my information when one conversation could have maybe changed that seller's mind, right? Or maybe I had more money than the person that I was connected, in the first place, or whatever it is. And so that's kind of something that we're building out in there. But then also, having other types of resources in there, right? So then I'm thinking, okay, Acquisition Syndicate, what's one thing that you're going to need to acquire business? Well, it's like freaking money, right? Mm-hmm. So then if you don't have the money, I've got an SBA business development officer who's an insurance agent for 7 years. And now she's doing SBA loans, and she's specific to insurance. Amazing resource, right? So, hey, now you've got the money. And then now we're working on bringing in a CPA that's valuation certified. So you've got the money, and then now this guy is going to tell you what you should actually be paying for that book, right? So there's a few things I think that go into building that group. But for me, it was, man, this is a hot market. I'm tired of what I'm seeing in these other groups, like all these people posting stuff. And we're dropping actually some really cool news on Friday about how to literally connect buyers to sellers and vice versa. So that's kind of my new baby. Again, it's really just helping people, like, hey, maybe it's not about going and acquiring book. Maybe it's about, dude, this sounds like an amazing partnership, right? To where maybe you find business partners out of it versus just buying them out. And obviously, main goal is to go and, basically buy extra revenue instead of having to build it ourselves. So I think there's a healthy mix of everything. But that's kind of where I started that. And then I started the Gaming Syndicate. That was actually, we're way long off for that. That's just kind of like a low key passion of ours. I believe you're in that group, but then one of my admins, Alex, is my support manager. It's actually work. I'm actually getting him on Facebook more. So don't tell him that. But that's like, he's being active. Plan. Like, yes. So that, I don't know if that's necessarily congruent, but there's ways to drive revenue with streams and Twitch, and he knows all that. So we're kind of just branching off there.
I love it. So, yeah. I love it. I mean, it's funny because, when I learned that same lesson that you learned from Coach Burt about keeping everything related, right? Everything connected. I learned it originally from taking a course from Grant Cardone.
Yep.
And so and I remember about that time, I was trying to do so many different things in my business, but none of them were related, none of them tied together. And that was, if you guys can take anything from this video, for me personally, there's a ton of nuggets that was shared on there, but if you had to take one thing from that video, take that, because I wasted so much time at the beginning of my career not understanding that. And now, it should be in unison, right? It should be like a beautiful, like symmetrical symmetry, of everything that you got going on. Like for us now, I think we've been able to kind of tie everything together. We have the Everything Medicare podcast, which is huge on our consumer side of the business. We have Six Figure Medicare Agent, which is separate, but it still ties together. It's our agent side of the business. And so I wish I learned that 5 years earlier than I did, which is a huge, huge gold nugget, guys. If you guys want to get into the Acquisition Syndicate, I'm going to drop a link to it down in the description of this video. So go check it out. I think that's a sick concept. And I'm excited to watch that grow.
I've got one last little tidbit on that congruency piece before we wrap up. This is something my dad always says, is that if it's not congruent, that's okay. It doesn't make it a bad idea. It's just not the right time, right? So, and I think a lot of the times, because it's the wrong time, we think it's a bad idea. I've had some gold freaking ideas, man. And then it's like, wait, hold on, Joe. Like, dude, that doesn't make sense, right? Not right now, right? But just because it's a good idea, it may just be the wrong time. So don't like devalue the idea, right? But maybe have a little folder for it, right? So, hey, once I kind of get all this set up, maybe now that idea kind of evolves over time to where maybe it becomes congruent, or hey, I'm in a position where maybe not everything has to be congruent to my business because I've built it up. I'm getting my residuals. Now I'm able to maybe go pursue some other passions or other ideas. Again, could be a good idea. It might just be the wrong time.
I love that. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And good stuff. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. And thank you so much for doing this, guys. If you're not connected with Joe, get connected with Joe. And like I said, I'll drop a link to the Acquisition Syndicate in the description of this video. Thank you for taking the time to do this. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate all the. It
will not be the last. I promise you that. Now we're getting you on our Winning on Wednesday call, man. Would love to have you. And I think calls like this are just so important, man, because it just shows. I think it's transparent, right? Like this is just some guys that have experience that are just being real, right? Being honest, like going through things that we're not the only ones that have gone through this, right? So thank you so much for having me on. I hope people find value in this. I'm not even hoping, I'm sure that they will. So again, thank you, brother. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for taking the time to watch the video. Hope you got something out of it. If you did, and you like to see videos like this, you want to see more interviews, drop a like. That's how I know that you guys are digging this kind of content. Drop a comment on what you thought. Drop a comment on, what you got the most out of the video, and make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you're notified when we upload. And we'll see you next time, guys. Here's to your success and your abundance. Thanks for watching.